All right. So now I'm going to be teaching about how to read an avalanche forecast. This is the homepage for avalanche.org. This is a really great website that has a map of every single avalanche forecast center in the United States. And essentially, each forecast center is different. It covers a specific area. And within that area, it gives advice on backcountry travel, what kind of avalanche problems are expected that day. They're posted every single day for most of the winter. And you can see that all of these avalanche forecasting centers, this is being recorded on May 30th. All of these avalanche forecast centers are now closed for the season. And so I'm going to show you an archived avalanche forecast to give an example of how to read it from the Sierra Avalanche Center, which is this one right here, which provides the forecast for the kind of northern Sierra Lake Tahoe zone. So this is obviously an archived post. This is no longer relevant to current snow conditions, and it says that pretty clearly at the top here. So the first thing you should always do is make sure that your avalanche forecast that you're reading is up to date, and it's not dated. So if it is dated, it's not very useful because that's previous snow data, previous avalanche forecasts. So the first thing you should do is read the bottom line, and essentially the bottom line is just going to if there's one thing you had to read on the avalanche forecast, it'll be this. Then the next thing is you look at this elevation profile. So this is kind of a big picture view of what the avalanche risk looks like for that day. So you can see here below tree line is kind of like in forests. Near tree line is where the trees start to thin out into kind of more open bowls and meadows. And above tree line is kind of, in the winter, it's wide open, blank white slopes. That's above tree line. And you can see on this day, this was right after they got a ton of snow and lots of high wind. And it was very high avalanche danger, very unstable snow on all elevations. This is the next thing you should look at. And this is rated on a 5-point scale. So low, moderate, considerable, high, and extreme. Low does not mean that there is no avalanche danger. There's always some avalanche danger present as long as there's snow. So just keep that in mind. But low generally means that there's a very stable snowpack, whereas extreme means that it's, you should probably not be in the backcountry that day. Then it gives you a rundown of each avalanche problem that is there per day. So I'm just going to run you through each aspect of this and explain what it is. So first, it obviously gives like the name of the avalanche problem, and then it's going to give you the symbol, which we saw in the snow science section earlier. And this symbol is just going to give you a little gist of like what that avalanche looks like, how it releases, and how it forms. Then it's going to give you this thing called an avalanche rose, and this is there are 8 aspects on this, and you can see there are 3 elevations. So the outer ring is below tree line, the middle ring is near tree line, and the upper ring is above tree line. And then you can see there each, the 4 cardinal directions, and then you have northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. And so this gives you an idea of kind of where this specific avalanche problem. So for this day, March 16th, it would be the wind slab problem would persist on all of these slopes that are shaded in gray here, and less of a problem on all the slopes that are still white. So maybe for this day, it might not be the best idea to ski slopes, that are, above tree line, near tree line with a wind slab. North facing. It really depends, and you have to take all of these avalanche problems into account to kind of make a decision on where you ski. So what you really want to do is find slopes that have, if you compare all the avalanche problems, you want to find slopes that have consistent white all the way through. So for this, really the only, quote unquote stable, even though it was a high backcountry day, but the least risk it looks like would be on southwest at above tree line slopes. And that's going to give you the lowest chance of triggering an avalanche. You can see it's not shaded on all 3 of these here. So that would be a good option for that day if you had to pick one day to ski, but you definitely should not be on slopes that are above 30 degrees to trigger an avalanche. So that's the avalanche rose. That's just going to give you an idea of where each avalanche problem persists. Then the likelihood is how likely an avalanche is to trigger, this certain type of avalanches to trigger. So again, this is on a 5-point scale from unlikely, possible, likely, very likely, and certain. So this is kind of just how easy is it to trigger this kind of avalanche. And then you have size, which goes small to historic. Historic is, one of the bigger avalanches in the area in, recent history. Very large is like, some of the biggest that year. Large is, obviously like a large avalanche. And small, it can be misinterpreted as like the avalanche being small, but that doesn't always mean it's necessarily like small. It could be pretty big, just not very destructive. That's going to give you kind of like a paragraph of synopsis about the avalanche problem. So it says, amounts of wind drifted in above tree line is created the wind slab problem. So that's what you see with that compass rose above tree line, near tree line, and above tree line. You see that. And this was obviously formed from wind coming from the west or the southwest, blowing over ridge tops and cornices and stuff and depositing snow on the other side, which causes unstable snow and kind of a wind slab problem. And this is just going to kind of give you a synopsis and give you some advice on what terrain to select. So you're going to have it honestly, it's not always 3 avalanche problems. On this day, it was 3 main avalanche problems for this area, but it's not always 3. It could be 4, it could be 1. It really just depends on the snow conditions. But each forecasting center kind of follows the same basic format because it's pretty much standardized by the U.S. Forest Service. So each of them are going to have a compass rose. It might look a little bit different for each avalanche center, but they're always going to have an avalanche rose to tell you where it is. They're always going to tell you what the problem is, likelihood, size, synopsis, everything. It's going to be consistent across every single avalanche forecast center. So then you have the forecast discussion. And this is similar to the bottom line, but it does kind of expand upon that a little bit more and tell you just about a little bit more about, what the snow is going to do, what the weather is going to do, and what kind of terrain you should select. Then the next is the observations section. And this is essentially, these are observations from people who went out the day before. And they're sometimes they're amateurs, sometimes they're professional avalanche forecasters, but it's really, really helpful to, you can go up to the observations tab. It's usually at the top of every single avalanche forecast center and be able to see observations and see pictures from the day before. And that's really, really helpful in my opinion because you're able to kind of get eyes on the snow and see what the snow's doing, see what it looks like, see, signs of instability. Sometimes the observations have pictures of cracking, which indicates a, obviously a weak snowpack. Then most avalanche forecasts, and then you can also submit observations. So if you take pictures during a day of like instabilities, recent avalanches, pretty much anything, the more observations an avalanche forecast center has, the better they are able to make more accurate forecasts because they don't just use information gathered by their avalanche forecasters. They actually do use crowdsourced information on these submit observation tabs from the general public. So it's really, really helpful. If you have any photos from the backcountry that day, you should submit them as soon as you get back so they're able to incorporate that the next morning in their avalanche forecast. Then you have the weather section. And so this is basically, again, like a 1-paragraph, synopsis of what the weather is going to do the next day, or that day, I guess. And then this is like actual weather stations. So 6 a.m. temperature. Most avalanche forecasts are posted at 7 a.m. So this is an hour before, so you can see the temperature, the maximum temperature in the forecast area, ridgetop wind direction. Obviously, there's that southwest flow that I was talking about earlier that causes this wind slab problem. So you can make inferences that wind slab problem is going to continue to grow as more wind comes from the southwest and deposits more snow on those other aspects. Average wind speed was pretty windy that day, again contributing to that wind slab problem. Maximum ridgetop wind gust. New snowfall. They got 30 inches the night before, and then it's going to give you kind of like a 2-day weather forecast. So this is Sunday, and it's going to give you like a general weather, synopsis. Temperatures range for that day, that night, and then the following day. Winds on like mid-slope and expected snowfall. And most forecast centers have it for kind of below tree line, near tree line. So in the case of the Sierra, this is kind of between 7,000 and 8,000 feet. And then kind of along the Sierra crest, more above tree line, you have the 8,000 to 9,000 foot forecast. And that's the final thing. And you can use this snow probability to kind of forecast for yourself and see what the snow is going to do. If it's going to become more stable, less stable, and you can also incorporate, obviously, the temperatures and stuff to make inferences for yourself. But it is a very, very slippery slope, making your own kind of avalanche forecast and deciding it for your own because these are people who are highly expertly trained to do this. They know what they're doing, and you should always, always, always read the avalanche forecast before you go out in the morning, because it will definitely give you some more information and data points about what the snow is doing, what the avalanche risk looks like, and it's going to allow you to make a much more educated decision about the terrain you ski that day.